Welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us today because, well, we are unpacking a truly unbelievable story. We're going to look at the wildly serendipitous, totally unprepared, and honestly almost accidental story of Pizza Hut's global success. You know, if you've ever felt like you needed a perfect, foolproof plan to achieve something massive, This Explainer is absolutely going to change how you view building an empire.
To really wrap our heads around how unlikely this success actually was, we have to jump back to Wichita, Kansas. The year is 1958. We've got two brothers, Dan and Frank Carney. They were just students at Wichita State University, and they wanted to start a business. The catch? They had practically zero capital. In fact, they launched what would eventually become a global juggernaut by borrowing just $600 from their mom. Think about that. $600?
And the contrast between those humble origins and where the brand is today is just hilarious. I mean, look at the modern Pizza Hut footprint, an absolute titan of the quick-service restaurant industry. We're talking over 16,000 locations spread across more than 100 countries. But back in 1958, the reality was completely different. They didn't have any professional commercial kitchen equipment, no giant industrial mixers. They actually mixed their very first batches of pizza dough in a literal plastic baby bathtub. You cannot make this stuff up.
Okay, so let's dive into Section 1, the baby bathtub origin, and see how constraints can actually birth an icon.
Now, what you have to keep in mind about Kansas in 1958 is that pizza wasn't exactly your standard Tuesday night dinner yet. It was viewed as this sort of exotic import. The Carney brothers didn't even intend to sell pizza in the first place. Actually, Frank, the younger brother, had only eaten pizza exactly once in his entire life. But a local landlord had this empty building, a tiny converted bar, and suggested they try selling this new East Coast pizza trend. So they called up a friend, John Bender, who happened to know how to make it. They took a crash course in pizza making for just 2 weeks and opened their doors on May 31st, 1958. To get the skeptical locals to actually try this strange new food, they just gave away free slices to get people in the door. And wow, it worked instantly.
So they've got a product, right? But they need a name. They're looking at the building, which was this small, squat structure, almost like a little hut. But more importantly, they look at the sign out front. It physically only had room for 8 letters. That's it. Pizza takes out 5. That left them with just 3 measly letters to finish the name. HUT fit perfectly. Literally one of the most globally recognized billion-dollar brand names in business history was chosen simply because their physical sign could not fit any more letters. Moving right along to Section 2, franchising and the $100 roof. Let's see how they went about building the empire.
So, the older brother, Dan Carney, pretty quickly realized that the real money wasn't just in running one successful restaurant, but in building an entire system. So just a single year after opening, in 1959, they started franchising in Topeka, Kansas. And the entry cost was laughably low. We're talking a $100 franchise fee to open, and then just $100 a month. Naturally, this sparked absolute explosive growth. By 1966, they had expanded to 145 locations. And by 1972, barely over a decade after mixing dough in a baby tub, they opened their 1,000th location.
Now, the story of how they achieved their famous visual identity is absolutely fascinating. Fast forward to 1969, and they needed a building design that would really stand out from the highway. So they approached a college friend, an architect named Richard D. Burke, to design it. Well, Burke wanted a hefty upfront fee, and the startup brothers simply couldn't afford it. So they compromised. They offered Burke a $100 royalty for every single store built using his design, and Burke took the deal. He likely never guessed they'd eventually built thousands of those iconic red roof restaurants. That $100 per roof handshake turned out to be an incredibly lucrative royalty for the architect, for sure.
All right, on to Section 3, menu shifts and tech firsts, taking us all the way from 10 cents to the internet.
If we look back at those original menus from the 1960s, which, by the way, were actually just printed straight onto paper placemats, the offerings were brilliantly simple. You had your 10-inch small pizzas, extra toppings cost just 10 cents, and you washed it all down with a beer or a pop. Super simple. But by the 80s and 90s, Pizza Hut really became an innovator in casual dining. In 1983, they launched the Personal Pan Pizza, which was perfect for lunchtime and eventually got tied to that legendary Book It reading program. Remember that? They also experimented with the deep dish Priazzo in 1985 and eventually dropped the famous stuffed crust in the mid-90s.
Now, before we get to the modern era, I actually want to pause the timeline for a second and throw a trivia question your way. Think back to the absolute dawn of e-commerce.
Before Amazon, before eBay, long before digital shopping carts were just a normal part of our everyday lives, what was the very first commercial item ever purchased on the internet? Any guesses?
Believe it or not, it was a pizza. Yep, in August 1994, Pizza Hut launched this pilot program called PizzaNet in Santa Cruz, California. And the very first commercial internet transaction in history was a large pizza with pepperoni, mushrooms, and extra cheese. It's wild to think about. Long before tech startups revolutionized food delivery, this Kansas pizza joint was quietly pioneering the entire future of online commerce.
Which brings us to Section 4, the PepsiCo era. Get ready for the ultimate plot twist.
So let's track this corporate journey here. In the 1970s, PepsiCo decided they wanted to diversify beyond just drinks and snacks and get their hands into the restaurant business. So in 1977, they acquired Pizza Hut from the Carney brothers for over $300 million. Let that just sink in for a second. From $600 borrowed dollars to over $300 million. PepsiCo's deep pockets really helped professionalize the operations and massively scale their national franchising. Then, exactly 20 years later in 1997, PepsiCo decided to refocus back on beverages. So they spun off the restaurant group, which included Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, and KFC, into an independent company that we now know today as Yum Brands.
But wait, what happened to Frank Carney after he sold his life's work? Well, this is where the story gets pretty wild. After selling Pizza Hut to PepsiCo and eventually leaving the company, Frank decided he wanted back into the pizza game in the 1990s. But he didn't rejoin his old brand. Nope. Instead, the co-founder of Pizza Hut became a massive franchisee for their rival, Papa John's. He eventually owned a staggering 133 of their locations.
And Frank wasn't exactly quiet about his defection either. During a period of intense legal struggles and corporate rivalry in the late 1990s, Papa John's actually filmed a commercial featuring Frank Carney. In this totally bizarre and hilarious prank, Frank literally crashed a Pizza Hut stockholder meeting wearing a Papa John's apron, looked straight at the crowd of his former executives, and just said, "Sorry, guys." Incredible.
All right, moving into Section 5, logos and nostalgic revivals. Let's see how this all comes full circle.
Visually, the brand's identity has evolved pretty significantly over the years. They formalized that classic red roof logo back in 1967. Then, in 1995, they modernized it with this swirling, energetic brushstroke roof and a green dot over the eye for a fresher look. But then, in 2014, sort of chasing that digital flat design trend everyone was doing, they completely discarded the iconic roof for a minimalist, pizza sauce red circle. The reviews? Well, they were incredibly mixed. Consumers really missed the heritage. So realizing the massive value of their legacy, they completely reversed course and brought the modernized classic red roof back in 2019.
But they didn't just bring the logo back to their advertising. They've actually been quietly bringing it back to the physical world with what are known as Pizza Hut classic locations. These are legacy restaurants that are literally being reverted to their cozy 1980s aesthetics. If you're lucky enough to find one, you'll see the 1974 logo on the pole sign outside. Inside, you've got the iconic red vinyl booths, the old-school stained glass lamps hanging down, stickers of the vintage mascot Pizza Hut Pete on the doors, and even a plaque honoring founder Dan Carney. They are successfully tapping right into the emotional memory of Friday night pizza dinners and the Book It era.
So the really crucial point here is how they're operating today. In the 2023-24 landscape, they're utilizing this very smart dual logo strategy. Basically, they use the modern, minimalist red circle emblem on their mobile apps and delivery platforms where digital simplicity is absolutely key. But for their physical storefronts and merchandise, they deploy the classic red roof to lean hard into brand heritage and authenticity. It's a really brilliant balance of modern tech convenience with pure, powerful nostalgia.
Yum Brands CEO David Gibbs really captured the whole thing perfectly when he said, "The red roof stands for Pizza Hut in the eyes of consumers." It really just shows how deeply ingrained Richard Burke's accidental $100 architectural design has become in modern culture. You can strip away the words, you can flatten the digital design, but that red trapezoid shape, it's immediately recognizable to anyone driving down a highway. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought directly inspired by Dan and Frank Carney. Think about it. They knew literally nothing about pizza. They had a borrowed $600, a 2-week crash course, a sign that forced their company name, and a plastic baby bathtub for mixing dough. You know, most of us wait for the perfect conditions to start something. We wait until we feel entirely ready. But the truth is, ready is overrated. If a multi-billion-dollar empire can be born in a baby bathtub, what brilliant idea are you sitting on right now just because you don't feel perfectly prepared yet? Start now, figure it out as you go, and hey, who knows, maybe you'll build the next big thing. Thanks so much for watching, and keep learning.